Hello and welcome to another Paramics Discovery video tutorial. My name's Graham and this is the second in our series of longer form video tutorials. Please let us know if you have any feedback on these, and the best way to do that is to get in touch via the support site. Now in this tutorial I'm going to be looking at matrix estimation, specifically focusing on some of the most common errors that people encounter when they carry out matrix estimation, and how best to deal with these. Matrix estimation is a key part of any model development, so it's important that it is carried out correctly. This is the model that we're going to be looking at in this example. Now, this is a relatively small model to be using the ME tool, and I would say that a model any smaller than this, especially if there's no root choice, I would probably be inclined to create the demands myself. But for the purposes of this example, I'm using this model so as that we don't have to wait too long for files to load. So in this model we do have some root choice. There's a bit of root choice here between these two competing roots and a bit in this area. There are three key inputs that we need to run matrix estimation: a prime matrix, a survey file, and a routing file. And first of all, we're going to look at the prime matrix. So for this model, this was an upgrade of an old Paramics model. So for my prime matrix here, all I've done is I've taken my old Paramics demands and reformatted them to the correct Paramics Discovery format. Now, often you aren't updating an older model, and if not, there are a number of other things you can look at. And I would recommend putting in quite a bit of time generating a sensible, realistic prime matrix before you start ME. And the reason I say that is because ME is not intelligent in itself, so the more information we can give ME to work with, the better. Another example of ways we generate prime matrices quite often is using higher tier models. Like if there's a wider area Saturn model, we might, for example, get a cordon of the area of our study area from the Saturn model and use that as our starting point for our prime matrix. And another helpful thing I like to do is, in my prime matrix, I like to zero any zone-to-zone movements that I think are extremely unlikely. And what this does is this prevents matrix estimation from adding any trips between those zones. It can only increase a value if it's got a value in. If it's zero, then it can't increase it. So once you're happy with your prime matrix, you want to make sure it's in the correct format, which is exactly the same as the demands file. And here's mine, and it just looks like that. If you aren't sure of the format to use, you can always generate a template from Paramics Discovery. So to do that, all we do is we go to our model, go to Edit Demand, and Edit Demand Matrix Estimation, and if we click this blue arrow, Generate Prime Matrix Template, that will produce an empty template with the right number of zones in the right format. Next, we're going to look at the survey file. So this is simply your surveyed turn and link count data matched up with the relevant node references. Now, if you're not sure of the format required for this, again, we can get a template from matrix estimation by clicking on the blue arrow next to survey data, generate survey template. But what I've got is one that I've already filled in. So if I go to that here, this is what it looks like. So we've got the column A is what type of turn it is. Is it a turn or a link? B is the matrix, so we're only looking at matrix 1 at the moment. And then we've got link, so if there was a value in this column it would be a link count, and then from link and to link, so we've got values in these two columns because it's a turn count. and then the count for that value. So in this example, on the turn from node 132 to 133 to 140 to 1344, there are 32 vehicles in matrix 1 observed to make that turn. So what I tend to do when I'm going through this process is I get all of my turn count data into one single spreadsheet, go through each turn and match up and work out the relevant node and link references, then export that out into a new sheet and format it into this format. Now it's quite straightforward. It's quite a simple format, so that's relatively easy to do. When you export a template, it exports data for every single turn and link, because obviously it doesn't know which junctions you have surveyed. So if you do that, what you'll want to do is remove each link that you don't have information for from the file. So you can do that either by deleting the row, or if you put a double hash at the start of the row, that means that matrix estimation won't read in that line. The next input we're going to look at is the routing file, also called a feature file. What this file does is it records the routes that vehicles would take between each zone in your model. And it does this at intervals because when you run a model with route choice, you should have feedback toggled on, which means that vehicles may change their route at intervals. So feedback usually is toggled on at 2-minute intervals. So we want to have our pager collecting at 2-minute intervals as well. What this does is it allows the pager to record the full range of route choice options that vehicles make across your simulation. Now, pager collection is done when you run the model. So what I would usually do is take my prior matrix and run it to collect the pager. If I'm having problems, I might lower my demand rate of my prior matrix so that I get the model to run through. And as I go through the process and end up collecting improved pagers, I can up that demand rate so it's up to 100. Now, to actually collect the file, it's under this option here, NE routing, and it's this toggle here, pager trips. And there are different options that we can set, but what I usually do is I leave this one at 100. What that is it records 100 vehicles between each zone-to-zone movement at each interval, and that just means that we get a percentage, which is a helpful number to get. This is the interval, so how frequently do we want to sample it? Every 2 minutes. When do we want to start? So I've got this set at 7, and when do I want the file to be written? In much larger models, you're likely to get a very large pager file. These files get big very quickly and can become kind of unwieldy. So what we can do is we can filter the file so that we only collect the information we need. So if I run with a link and turn filter, what that does is the pager only collects information for junctions in my survey file. So to do that, in this box here, I load in my survey file and it will just collect information for those junctions. Additionally, I can also run an OD filter. So what this does is this only collects pager information for zone-to-zone movements that have a non-zero value in my demands. Okay, so I've generated my 3 input files, and I'm now going to load those into matrix estimation and run the module and see what happens. So to load them in, I go to edit demand, matrix estimation, and I want to load my prime matrix in, which is here, my survey file in, which is here, and my routing file in, which is here. And then once I've got those 3 files in, I check which matrix I'm looking at. So we're just looking at matrix 1 at the moment. We're just going to use 5 iterations, and I'm going to hit run matrix estimation. And almost inevitably what happens when you first do this is you'll get some errors. So if I hit run at matrix estimation, here we go, and we've got a couple of errors. So what this says is matrix estimation is unable to process the file survey file _first.csv. And there are 2 errors. So turn 132 to 133 to 140 to 13444 does not exist in this model. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that at the moment, but I'm going to have a look at my model and my files to see if I can work this out. So just so I can keep this on screen, I'm going to take just a snip of this. I can keep that on screen here and close this and look at my model. So if I go to Edit Network and zoom in to, what node number was it, 132. So if I zoom in and type in 132, turn on my nodes here. So 132 to 133 is here, and 140 to 13444. So 140 is here, and 134 is here, and there is no 13444. So what's happened here is there's a typo probably in my survey file. And similarly, if I look at 132 to 133 here, and 136 to 12666, which is down here, then actually that should also be 126. So if I go to my survey file and load that up, what I can see, if I just make that column a bit wider, is these top 2 here, 132 to 133, 1344, and 12666. So what I can do, what I've done obviously here is when I've been typing these in, when I've been going through my model, is I've mistyped on these 2 node names, and all I need to do is correct them here. So if I adjust that to 134 and that to 126. Now, if I save that, close it, I'll be able to load this survey file in now. Okay, so I've corrected my survey file, removed those spurious node references, and what I want to do now is load in my corrected file into ME and hit run matrix estimation. And what happens now is I get a different error, this time unable to process the file pija 702.csv, and I've got a pija error, survey data turn 132 to 133, 139 to 132 does not have pija info. Okay, so again I'm going to take a little snip of, again I'm going to take a little snip of this, and what I'm going to do, move that off to the side, close this and investigate that turn. So first off, I'm going to look in my survey file because I know I had mistakes in there before. So if I load this up, the second one, and the turn that I'm looking for is 132 to 133, 139 to 132. So 132 to 133, 139 to 132 is this line here, and I've got 4 in it. Okay, and if I go to that in my model, again we're up at the same area. So it's 132 to 133, and then 139 to 132. So what this is it's this U-turn at this roundabout. And in my survey file, I can see I've got 4 vehicles that make that turn. So what that says to me is that U-turn, here to here, if there's only 4 vehicles doing it, it's not that important to my model operation, and it's probably included, it's probably surveyed vehicles that have maybe gone the wrong way or turning around for some other reason. So in my model, the way I've got it set up at the moment, if I look up here, I've just got one zone here. So as we know, we can't have trips from this zone to itself. So there's no way of me including these U-turns without splitting this link and having an extra zone. And as there's only 4 of them, I'm thinking that they're not going to have a big impact on my model. So I'm probably best just to ignore them. If there was some road layout, say a left out only here, which meant that a lot of U-turners were likely, then I would want to include them. But as it is, all I'm going to do is get matrix estimation to ignore them. So if I go to my survey file, all I want to do to get matrix estimation to ignore a line is type a double hash at the start of it. There we go. So this should mean that we don't get this error reappearing. So if I load in my corrected survey file again, which is this one, and run matrix estimation, we should get the final one of the common errors that we get when we run ME. So I'm just going to take another snip of that so that we can come back to it. And what it's saying here is it's an error with the demands file this time. So all OD pairs using turn 130 to 131, 137 to 128 with a non-zero count sum to a demand of 0. Okay, so that's slightly confusing wording, but what it means is that there is information in the survey file for a particular movement, but for some reason ME has not been able to assign any trips to that movement. So let's again have a look at what that movement is. So I'm just going to go to my network, zoom in, and what it is, it's 130 to 131, 137 to 128. So 130 to 131 is here, and 137 to 128 is here, so it's this movement, which is a legitimate movement, and the node numbers have been input correctly. So what I'm going to do is look at which zones this applies to. So in this instance, it's trips between zone 1 and zone 4. Now, if I go and open up my prior matrix, what I should be able to see is that I have a 0 here. So this is the cell which represents trips from zone 1 to zone 4. So because that's 0, ME is unable to assign any trips to match that surveyed turn. Now, the reason it can't do that is because ME works using multipliers, and obviously it can't multiply 0 to anything higher than 0. So what we want to do is change this value so as that we have something for ME to work with. And in fact, if I look in my survey file, I can, because it is a turn which is directly observed between 2 zones, so the only people who can make that turn are coming from zone 1 to zone 4, I can input the actual value from the surveyed counts into my prior, because I know that that is in this instance correct. So if I go to my survey file and remind myself what turn it was, 130 to 128, so we go down, it's this one, so there's just 6, so I'll close that and put a 6 in that cell. And now if I go back to matrix estimation, what I should get is matrix estimation now running with no more errors. So if I load in my updated prior matrix, which is this one, hit run matrix estimation, what we'll see is no error box has popped up, and we've got an output location on the bottom here and how many iterations the process ran. So if I hit open on this output location, what this does, this takes me to the outputs from that run of ME. So there are a number of different things here. I'll just quickly take you through each of these files. So first up, we've got the estimated demands. And all this is ME's taken our prior demands, compared it to our survey counts, and this is what it estimates as more appropriate demands for the matrix. Now we can look at each OD, looking at OD differences, and this takes each OD pair on a line, tells you the prior value and the final estimate. And what you can use that to do is to see which OD movements matrix estimation has made significant changes to. So I might, for example, sort this column. So this is final estimate difference. And I could look if there are any very large or very small numbers here and investigate, is that a sensible zone-to-zone pair for ME to be changing? And we also have our turn and link count differences files. So if I open up the turn count differences, this takes each of our surveyed turns from our survey file, tells us the survey count and the estimates through the ME process, and includes estimated GEH. And what I can do here is, again, I might sort on first estimate difference, and again have a look at which specific turns are particularly out between our surveyed and our estimated, and I can investigate if there are very high numbers, why that might be. And the final file, that is a newer file which is very useful, especially on larger models, is the PIJA report. There's a lot of information in here. But what this does is it tells us for each zone-to-zone pair which links are used by vehicles between these zone-to-zone pairs and in what proportions. So if I just take this top example, zone 15 is the origin and 8 is the destination. And this movement here, 235, 236, etc., it tells us that 0.01 proportion, so 1% of vehicles will use this link, whereas 99% of vehicles will use that link. And what you can use that for is, if you have a specific turn that you're struggling with, you can use the report to see which movements are going through that turn, and you can increase or decrease that movement yourself accordingly. Now, what really happens when you're running ME is it's an iterative process. So that was my first run of ME. What I would probably do now is go through, look at all these output files, say which zone-to-zone movements I want to change. There might be too many coming from zone 15, or one specific movement like 11 to 4 I could increase or decrease, and I'd make some changes to my prior matrix, and potentially also make some changes to my model. And what I would then do is go through the process again with new input files and rerun ME, make some changes to my prior matrix, go through the process again, rerun ME, and so on. So network changes I might make is, I might, for example, have too many vehicles using this route as opposed to this one, so I might end up making this a minor route, or putting a cost factor on, or something like that. And something to bear in mind is, anytime you make a network change like that, you'll need to run your model again and collect a new PIJA, so as that your PIJA information is updated and matrix estimation is operating off the most up-to-date information. So that's the end of this video on troubleshooting matrix estimation. I hope that you found that useful. Please let us know if you have any comments or feedback.